Hello, and welcome to the Mothertown Podcast, a collaboration between Thayer Memorial Library and Sterling-Lancaster Community Television. My name is Rachel Rosengard, and I am the Assistant Director at Thayer Memorial Library. October is Disability Awareness Month in Lancaster. Thayer Memorial Library, working along with Lancaster's Commission on Disability, looks to increase exposure to the lived experiences of those with disabilities. The Lancaster Commission on Disability aims to educate our community on resources available to them and to encourage conversations about living with or caring for individuals with disabilities. My guests today are Brendan Aylward, owner of Unified Health and Performance Gym and AdaptX here in Lancaster, and Lesley Allison of Lancaster's Commission on Disability. Welcome to both of you.
Hi, Rachel.
Thanks for having us.
Brendan, tell us a little bit about your personal and professional background.
Yeah, of course. So in recognition of Disability Awareness Month, I do tend to specify that I don't intend to speak on behalf of people with disabilities, but I do have a lot of insight from hundreds of athletes and clients that we've worked with over the last 10 years. But I went to Neshoba. I graduated in 2011, and as a sophomore, I first got involved with Special Olympics. So the district started a unified basketball program, and my mom suggested that I volunteer, and it was my first exposure to disability, and I was immediately enamored with the environment and the genuine connection with the kids, and pretty quickly took over most of the Special Olympic programs for the district. We ran 4 or 5 different sports year-round, and that led me to pursue a special education degree, which transitioned into an exercise science degree and wrapped up by opening a facility in 2016 where my Special Olympic athletes could train alongside their peers.
That's awesome. Tell us what unified training is and how you were inspired to create an inclusive gym.
Yeah, it's definitely evolved over the years, as my understanding of inclusion has as well, but it was initially heavily influenced by Special Olympics model. But through conversation and just, I guess, the nature of iteration that happens when you run a business, we've changed and pivoted, and COVID changed some things as well, and ultimately actually for the better in some regards. But what we do, whether we're working with a high school or collegiate athlete or a traditional adult or one of our athletes with disabilities, is we start, I guess, with what their objective or goal is, figure out what they can and can't do, and then structure training in a way that supports what they can't and highlights what they can. And I think that has become a pretty powerful environment for a lot of people who might have had a preconceived idea that the gym wasn't for them, and we've shown them that they can seamlessly coexist in a traditional gym. You might think of adaptive fitness, and you might think of like a Spalding rehabilitation hospital and assume that fitness for people with disabilities is reserved for physical therapists. But we really advocate for more gyms to adopt a more inclusive and accessible mindset, so people with disabilities have more opportunities to be active, to address some of those health disparities.
It sounds like an inherently positive environment. Everyone's doing what they're able to do. No one's being discouraged from trying something.
Yeah, I hope people find it to be a positive environment. I think the literature on inclusion as a whole has evolved a lot over the last few years, and you see it now being recognized as not necessarily the physical presence of people with and without disabilities in the same environment, but a feeling that people get when they're in a specific environment, and that's dynamic and changes. But ultimately, it's not up to me to determine whether someone feels included. It's up to them. And the only thing that I can do is give them a few different options and opportunities to exist in the way that they want to and participate alongside the people that they want to. So there's a lot of different things that I can talk about there. But yeah, I hope people find it to be a positive environment.
Lesley, you're a member of Unified, correct?
Correct, yes.
Tell us about your experiences using the facilities.
What I love about Unified is that, I think the programming that Brendan does is excellent for all his members. I think it's very up to date on, the science for exercise physiology as far as what is most beneficial to us. I also find the environment to be extremely friendly and fun. I've met a lot of other wonderful adults that are interested in fitness in that facility. And I also find it very inspiring to work out next to other athletes or adults that have physical challenges. it's a very inspiring environment.
Brendan, when you started Unified, did you model your gym after existing gyms? Were there gyms doing similar programs?
I would be hesitant to say that I'm the only for-profit inclusive strength and conditioning facility, but I haven't come across one that's modeled in the same way. Of course, there's a lot of gyms that support people with disabilities, but I haven't found one that has kind of built their ethos around that, or one that isn't a nonprofit entity that was designed solely to support people with disabilities. I think that's one of the unique aspects of my gym is we're not a charity. We don't treat our people with disabilities as if they were a charitable case. They're a part of our community. They're a part of our business model, and we've demonstrated that inclusion can be an economic portion of a business. It can be a revenue-generating asset. It doesn't have to be a charitable endeavor. And that's something that I talk to about, or I talk to with other gym owners about, that you don't have to view inclusion as a sacrifice or as compromising on something. It can be a viable part of your business. And I think that's an important message to communicate, because there's something called the charity model of disability that kind of perpetuates this narrative that people with disabilities are helpless and requiring people without disabilities to support them. And we want to kind of rewrite that narrative and showcase what they can do when they have the proper support.
So that attitude toward your business model seems really unique.
Yeah, I think so.
Here, I think that that's a good segue to the definition of inclusion, including people who have disabilities with everyone else, not thinking them as separate, but making them part of, your general clientele, your general population.
Yeah, definitely. And Brendan, Unified had been up and operating for several years when you started a new endeavor called AdaptX. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so initially, I guess the pieces that have become AdaptX were educational modules that I was creating, as I found it to be one of the best ways for me to learn personally. So we would have someone with a specific diagnosis inquire about training, and I would want to learn more about it. So I would do a lit review. I would consume as much content as I could, and I put it together into presentations that I could share with my staff so they could get up to date as well. And it kind of just kept snowballing until it was a pretty significant curriculum that other people were asking for. And so a few years ago, we released, I guess, a course that a few hundred people have taken so far. And at the request of YMCA of the USA, actually, they're hoping, or we're in the process of restructuring it so it would be delivered as an online platform with a variety of different courses, mini courses that people can kind of pick and choose. But I guess the main thing of AdaptX is it's a organization that's committed to improving the education of health and fitness professionals around inclusion and adaptive fitness.
So more people can use the model that you've developed.
Right. Yeah. So I guess ultimately it was like, I wasn't convinced that I wanted to own multiple gyms, but I did want to have an impact on the inclusivity of other gyms. And we found education to be one of the primary barriers. I think too often programs exist only for the people with disabilities, but they don't address some of the more systemic barriers, which are health and fitness professionals aren't comfortable or confident in supporting people with disabilities. And I think we're one of the few organizations that's trying to address that.
So would it be accurate to say that the type of people you're serving through AdaptX are both the athletes, the people training, and then the people who are the trainers?
Yeah, so it's more so a train the trainer model in that we're focusing almost exclusively on the health and fitness professionals. And then the second order effect of that, which is the primary goal, is for more people with disabilities to have the opportunity to train. But the way that we're going to accomplish that is to educate more people that are entering the field on the value of inclusion and the execution of it. And then hopefully they go forward and adopt a similar model to my gym, or they implement pieces of it in whatever model they execute. And then more people with disabilities have the opportunity to train. So
AdaptX is involved in research projects to address needs of individuals with disabilities. Can you tell us about the research that you've conducted or participated in, and how have those results impacted your programming?
Yeah, we have a few publications on cerebral palsy, and they're intervention-based things, like trying to come up with the most effective, I guess, training strategies for those populations. But then we kind of identified that that might not be the direction that we exactly want to take it in. So we're focusing more on implementation sciences, which is how to get organizations to change their attitudes and their behaviors towards inclusion, and identifying what those barriers are so we can address them through our curriculum. So our research now is more so focused on the adoption of these inclusive recommendations and how gyms benefit. And then again, that second order effect of how many people with disabilities benefit from it. So our focus now is more so on the barriers versus the actual interventions, because the interventions are fine. They exist and they're exciting and they're fun to work on. But at the end of the day, it's more important that we kind of create more opportunities versus just interventions.
Right. And you're helping other people create more business for themselves, right? The more you can include other people, the more it's going to benefit the gym that you own.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's the economics of inclusion is something that people don't want to talk about, like that you can make money from people with disabilities. And that's not meant to say that you're taking advantage of people with disabilities. I think if you look at the discretionary income of people with disabilities as just a population level compared to Hispanics and African Americans and other populations, you see that they actually have a larger discretionary income, but for some reason they're still not marketed to as a population. And so I think oftentimes I'm speaking to two different consumers, either someone who is passionate about inclusion but doesn't know how to implement it within their gym, or someone who's a great strength and conditioning coach but isn't convinced about the value of inclusion. And I think I can kind of speak to both, because I did grow a business that was successful because of inclusion, but I also had that initial passion for inclusion. So we're either convincing people of the value or we're teaching people of the execution.
There must be an aspect of you don't know what you don't know also with gym owners.
Yeah, and there's plenty of things that I don't know. So that's why we bring in a very diverse team of people with and without disabilities to kind of spearhead these things. The revision of our curriculum, we have about 25 people working on the various courses, and about probably 2/3 of them have disabilities themselves, but they're also subject matter expertise on those various diagnoses as well. They might be professors or athletes that have a specific specialty that they can contribute. But yeah, gym owners definitely, there's not much education around inclusion. There's no adaptive fitness literature in that regard, but if you look to physical education literature, you see that most teachers aren't comfortable supporting students with disabilities in PE classes because there's no pre-service training on it. So you could probably extrapolate that to fitness as well and assume that that's one of the barriers.
Right. And you have a podcast also under the AdaptX brand. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, I was having great conversations with incredible people, and they were happening in private. And I was like, I might as well share these with other people that I think could benefit from it. We take episodes of the podcast and incorporate it into our curriculum. It's a great way to include more voices. But ultimately, the goal of the podcast, I guess, we say in kind of the introduction, is to amplify the voice and ideas of people with and without disabilities to kind of create a more inclusive world. So that's either people building accessible businesses or advocating for inclusion or participating in adaptive sports. We have Paralympians and professors and business owners, and it's just me learning in public, basically, me asking them questions, things that I'm interested in, and them teaching me. So
you must find that very inspirational.
Yeah, I find it a combination of inspirational and educational. The things that just, I guess, to diverge slightly, there's a trend, I guess, in the disability space to view accomplishments of people with disabilities as inspirational, and in many cases that is warranted. But we call it like inspiration porn in my world, where you shouldn't be celebrating someone with a disability solely because they have a disability. You should be celebrating them because of the great things they've overcome. And most of our guests on the story have overcome amazing things, but it's important to highlight those and not necessarily the rudimentary tasks. I think some of our guests have articulated it a lot better than I have when they're in the grocery store and someone's saying, wow, I'm so proud of you for grocery shopping with that prosthetic. And they're like, I don't want to have to be responding to all these like comments that people think are well-intentioned, but they end up being degrading to people. So it's always well-intentioned. People don't intend on offending people with disabilities in most cases, but just being aware, I guess, of your language and your etiquette.
Yeah. That's really an excellent point, that, someone with a disability doesn't owe you some kind of positive feedback because you're saying something nice, you know?
Yeah, the feedback tends to not be because they want to compliment the person. They want to feel better about themselves for complimenting the person. So
they want credit for being a good
Right.
person type of thing. Yeah. Lesley, I want to draw you into the conversation some more. Can you tell us more about what inclusion is? How is it defined? How do people who, you know, are quote unquote normal, what can they do or what can they be aware of to help them have more of an open mind when dealing with people who need inclusion considerations?
Sure. So the way I like to talk about it is that if you look at the just general population, every person is different. And we all have a tendency to make assumptions about individuals by the way they look, by the way they behave. But we're all different, and you should not make any assumptions about any individual who has a disability based on how they look. And they're just another participant in life, a participant in any particular activity, and we should all have an open mind when interacting with all individuals, and especially those who might be perceived as being different.
I think that's one of the unintended consequences of my gym that I find to be really valuable is a lot of our adults have commented how they're more comfortable conversing or interacting with people with disabilities because that shared recreation, they're in the same space and they realize that they have similar interests to people with disabilities and that it's not an other population. That's one thing that I've been really proud of. My high school clients becoming Special Olympic coaches, my adults feeling more comfortable around disability and talking about disability. So.
Yeah, it's the commonalities that bring us together.
Exactly.
Yeah. Question for both or either of you. How can companies be more inclusive and more accessible to people who need accommodations?
Going off of kind of what Lesley was saying on how you view the needs of people, I think, so there's some preconceived standard of what normal is, and everyone that operates outside of that sense of normalcy is considered to have a disability. And if instead, I guess we look at the unique characteristics of someone, but we consider the environment that they're in as the disabling feature. So this is called the social model versus the medical model of disability, that it's not someone's specific impairments that are disabling, but it's a society that was not designed for them. So businesses that design with disability in mind, you need to incorporate the lived experience and the feedback from those disabled customers or consumers or staff members that you have. But really viewing the needs of people as not special. They're not special needs. They're not accommodations. It was actually a conversation I recently had with a physician at University of Michigan, and has a spinal cord injury. And he was saying how nice it is that waiting rooms have accommodations for standing people, and they offer chairs, and he doesn't have to bring a chair with him, or they don't have to provide that chair for him, or how we turn on the lights for people who can see, and that's an accommodation that people who are blind don't require, and how much money businesses could save if they didn't have to turn on the lights. So just viewing, I guess, the needs of people as not necessarily special or unique, but just as needs that allow them to thrive.
And I'll just point out that from a very basic standard, the standards of accessibility that can be found with the Americans with Disability Act. If your facilities are accessible based on the ADA requirements, that will be more welcoming to people of all abilities to attend and be a part of what you're trying to do.
Right. And the ADA requirements, those are minimum standards, right? So there are things that businesses can do.
Right.
Above and beyond. I really had a light bulb moment when I heard you say it's the environment that's disabled and not the person. That's a complete 180 from, I think, how we tend to look at things. What other misconceptions might people have about disabilities or about inclusiveness?
Yeah, I gave a lecture on this yesterday. So adaptive fitness is not reserved for exclusively medical professionals. If the only opportunity people with disabilities have to exercise is going to physical therapy, then they're never going to hit the CDC's recommended levels of daily physical activity. So just creating community-based programs Business owners assume that accessibility is expensive and it has no return on investment. I'll hear from gyms like, I don't need those automatic door openers. I don't have any wheelchair users. I'm like, well, you don't have any wheelchair users because you don't have accessible doors. So that's probably why. But I mean, we've shown through our gym somewhere between a quarter and a third of our revenue comes from people with disabilities. But you have to kind of look at the broader market. The Return on Disabilities Group's global economic report that they just published last month showed that 22% of the population has a disability, but if then you factor in the 2 close family members or friends that every person with a disability has that cares about the inclusivity and the accessibility of a business, they're more likely to be loyal to those businesses. Then that's 2.9 billion people. And if you were to tell a business that their market cap could increase by just making their facility more accessible and inclusive, and they could potentially reach 3 billion more people, I think you would start to see the value of inclusion beyond just an altruistic thing.
Those numbers are pretty persuasive.
I hope so.
This question is, again, for both or either of you. Have there been any surprises or unexpected consequences or interesting discoveries along the way in your journeys at Unified Health?
I can bring up what we discussed the other day.
I was going to say, no pressure. Just tell us what everything that inspires you immediately.
Well, I just think, I mentioned I've met a lot of other inspiring adults at Unified who, may not meet any definition of disability. And sometimes a gym can be a very scary place for people who, may not feel comfortable in their body and don't have experience in a gym. But in the environment at Unified, it's very welcoming, and you'll find people of all shapes and sizes coming in and just doing their thing. And I think, taking away that barrier of, feeling like you're not going to belong somewhere because of the way you look, can really open the doors for a lot of people.
Yeah, I hope that's the case. And it's definitely been an unexpected outcome of having an inclusive gym. Like I said, I started it for Special Olympics. So my vision was like, this is a place where people with Down syndrome and autism and intellectual disabilities could train alongside their peers. I didn't have much experience with SEI, stroke, significant physical disabilities, because that's not really the population that Special Olympics caters to. But then we got our first client with multiple sclerosis that used a walker. We got our first client with a spinal cord injury, a C-level spinal cord injury, who uses a motorized wheelchair. And I had to make some adjustments to the environment for them to make it accessible. They were modifications that benefited the physical therapy clients as well at our facility as well, just wider walkways, etc., things like that. The building that we bought wasn't inherently very accessible, so we had to change a lot of things with the parking, like the handicap parking or the accessible parking spaces weren't the proper width, and we had to redo the parking lot and things like that, and add automatic doors at the front and widen some doors in the hallways. But I think I realized that I didn't have to have an expertise in every disability that came. I just had to care enough to find the answers for them and listen to them and support them. So
yeah, that's an awesome point. You don't have to be an expert in everything. You just have to be willing to learn.
Yeah, I mean, if you've met someone with autism, you've met one person with autism, and that really tells me nothing about them as a person, that diagnosis, in the same way that a CP diagnosis, there's 5 classification levels and further categorization beyond that. So the diagnosis only tells you so much, but the experiences and the interactions that you have with the individual will tell you a lot more.
Yeah. You've had such amazing professional experience in your career so far. What else do you hope to accomplish?
Be a good father. And I don't know if my kids who are 2 and 10 months will ever benefit from the inclusive environments that I create. Maybe they will, or maybe they won't need those in the future, but I want them to grow up with disability in mind and kind of view differences as the diversity of life that makes it great. And I think it's what makes my gym great. And it's not what I've done, it's what the people that are members have brought to it. So
I'm really glad you mentioned your kids, because I want to go off topic just a little bit for a moment and mention that at Neshoba Regional High School, They have unified sports for students who need accommodations. They also have unified chorus. I've had a couple of kids in band over the years, and oftentimes the chorus and the bands will perform on the same night, and the unified chorus is always the highlight. Those kids have such a blast. It just makes everyone in the auditorium feel awesome. They have incredible positive energy. So if anyone listening has kids in the Neshoba school district, you can look forward to some great times in high school if they are interested in athletics and or music.
I mean, I was so lucky. Like, I had no exposure to disability prior to Neshoba Special Olympic programs, prior to Neshoba Unified Sports. And if I went to any other high school, I'm not sure what I would be doing now. So it completely overhauled the trajectory of my career. I actually wanted to be an audio engineer for the first couple of years of high school. And I was really into music, and then that experience just completely changed it for me. So we're very lucky here that Neshoba has incredible programs. Our Best Buddies chapter was chapter of the year when I was a senior. So I got to go to Indiana for that recognition, and our Special Olympics programs are great. So.
Yeah, and now that we've given a shout out to the school, Lesley, is there anything you want to add from the Commission on Disability about this topic?
I'm very grateful that we have Brendan and Unified in Lancaster. I think what he's doing is very unique, and I just really appreciate the fact that his programming, his AdaptX program, is reaching out to other gyms to increase inclusiveness, as much as we can in the fitness community. And yeah, that's it. I would like to just make one small comment too. Professionally, I'm a physical therapist, and so I work in the healthcare setting, and I work with disability on a daily basis. And one thing that I also think is unique about the Unified Gym is that I think it's a great transition for those who have participated in an inpatient rehabilitation program. And there always comes a time where you end your physical therapy services, but you still benefit from physical activity and exercise. And I think that Unified offers a great opportunity for individuals like that.
Yeah, and there's certainly things that physical therapists can do that I cannot do. And that inpatient process, if someone suffers a traumatic injury and has to go to Spalding or something similarly, those are essential parts of the recovery process. But at some point, those patients want to become participants in their community, and in the same way that like people with disabilities tend to be more active during the school day than they are on the weekends, just by nature of school and the opportunities that provides. So when someone turns 22 and ages out of the school system, they lose that. And so we kind of want to be that bridge between the adolescence and adulthood for people with disabilities, and also that bridge between rehabilitation and recreation for people. So.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you both so much. To learn more about Brendan Aylward's work, you can visit AdaptX, ADAPTX.org, and unifiedhp.com. Unified Gym and AdaptX are right here in Lancaster on Bolton Road. I like to say right near the intersection formerly known as Five Corners. To learn more about Lancaster's Commission on Disability and their work for our community, you can phone the Commission at 978-365-3326 and then choose extension 1087. To learn more about Lancaster's ADA Awareness Month, you can visit the library or check out our webpage at www.thayermemoriallibrary.org. Lesley and Brendan, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your experiences with us. This has been a terrific afternoon together. Once again, I'm Rachel Rosengard, the Assistant Director at Thayer Memorial Library. From all of us here at the Mother Town